So, Dusk 12, the first person shooter that tried to be Crisis but couldn't quite be Crisis, even though I don't think it was actually trying to be Crisis, but ended up being somewhat Crisis-esque. I will explain that in a little moment. But yes, Dusk 12, obviously you have, well, possibly seen the Let's Play, maybe you're just looking at this for the review, in which case, welcome, I will give you my Cliff Notes very quickly. Dusk 12 was a first-person shooter, based around the idea of two different viewpoints. One through the eyes of a soldier whose name I cannot remember for the life of me, nor care, and the Jolly Green Giant with shoulder pads, who was about as much of an effective super soldier as my dick is an effective carjack, which is to say, not very. You progress through a series of first-person shooter bog-standard levels with some interesting fights and interesting settings, and a story that I haven't got the fucking clue, until you kind of awkwardly fight your way to a conclusion. Mechanically, it's relatively competent, although I've had a lot of people saying they had technical issues getting the game working, the physics engine wasn't working, lots of stuff like that, but when you're getting a repackaged from physical media to downloadable media kind of content, especially when it wasn't a major AAA release, do expect slight snags with the translation, especially if you've picked up the game for about 30p. I mean, I'm looking on the Steam website right now, and the entire old school shooter bundle, which is, I think, Dusk 12, Operation Matriarchy, the Stalin Subway, and the Stalin Subway with Red Veil, the whole thing, all four games, 89p. So you can kind of see where I'm coming from in that you're getting what you pay for, and if you're not paying a lot, you're not getting much. but at the same time, I would actually consider this to be a game worth playing. It's entertaining, it's a good time killer, it's not the most dramatically, technically competent game you're ever going to see, but it's got some nice ideas, a lot of guns, a nice enemy variety as well. It's just, it suffers from that abruptness that you can kind of notice whenever a game is trying to do too much than its budget and timescale can really achieve, which I will touch upon later. But yeah, if you see this for, I mean, if you see it at the moment, it's like 39p, which is a fucking pittance. You could get that trading in Steam cards. In fact, I probably will, actually, because I'm just trading in a bunch of the ones I've been using recently. But yeah, if you see it going cheap and you fancy something that can just kill a couple of hours, it's worth giving a go. If you do have technical faults with it, that's a shame, but you haven't exactly blown 20 quid in it, or you haven't paid like for fucking Assassin's Creed Unity. So, into more detail. So the overall, I suppose I should start with the strongest elements of the game, in that, well, this is kind of something that I think Eurojank games in general tend to have, which is they tend to have some really nice ideas and some really nice technical concepts, but the execution is what tends to fall over. What I really like about this game is that it does give you a big variety of enemies to fight, and they're not just copy and pasted different reskins of different enemies. They do actually have entirely unique models, entirely unique animations. The only real drawback with them is that they don't specifically have any unique attacks necessarily. Comparing the human enemies to the mutant enemies, most of the human enemies are pretty universal. They either run up and smack you, or they stand back and shoot you with different guns. And that's pretty much it. Some are a little bit tougher, some are not quite so tough. Although I did heavily appreciate none of them are tremendous bullet sponges. If you shoot someone in the head, they act like they've been shot in the head, meaning that precision shooting is actually recommended, which is so nice because a lot of these low spec games you'll find they just don't bother mapping the hitboxes properly, so you just have one universal health for the entire body, whereas a proper headshot should drop a fucker. So you can see where I was going with there. But those guys are all taken care of with the... Oh, actually, not all of them, but most of them are taken care of with the foot soldier character. Again, I cannot recall the names of either of these characters, but honestly, I don't really care. So you can kind of see where I'm coming at and that I'm not doing a huge amount of research for this review. So it's quite nice. There's a certain amount of cover taking because you are often facing quite overwhelming numbers, but it's not arena shooty, so you are actually making use of the environment. You're not just running around a big sandbox blasting everything you see. Especially in later levels where you start getting ambushed by mutants and you actually have to start working out what's the best weapon to move through this particular part of the environment. It's quite nice. It's not specifically the most overwhelmingly competent put together array of enemies and the most competently put together selection of levels, but some of them were quite good. I would actually consider them to be fairly entertaining. The one part where you're moving down a viaduct and you've got people shooting at you from opposite sides of the river that you can't access was quite nice. It still reminds me a little bit of Half-Life. And if a game can remind me a little bit of Half-Life, that's something well done. But when it came to fighting as the mutant, the Jolly Green Giant with fucking stupid shoulder pads, this is where the game's ambition started to be outstripped by its lack of execution. The whole idea is you play as a super soldier, and when you say super soldier, you immediately mean super strong, super tough, cool special abilities. You maybe have one and a half of those, because he is strong-ish. This guy is capable of picking up a car and throwing it at a helicopter. He is capable of picking up a sack of potatoes and launching it like a fucking bullet at an enemy. However, he is also incredibly fragile, and the game never really seems to recognise that, because it puts you in a lot of situations where you do have to just slog it out, and you have no ranged abilities for a lot of the game. Almost until like the third act, you actually are purely operating off your fists, slow-mo, night vision, and fast movement. And you can actually trigger those in a combination as well. I would have liked a bit more effort in trying to make those things synergize, but again, that's something where I'm kind of expecting a lot more from a game that cost me less than the price of a fucking Mars bar. But I did just end up approaching a lot of situations with this mistaken confidence that, yeah, I'm a fucking super soldier, and then just as I got destroyed by like one douchebag with an AK, or on several occasions dropping a barrel right in front of me and it just explodes and kills me instantly. And yeah, that was a bit that was a touch frustrating. So I mean, that wasn't necessarily like a game breaker for me, because I could work around that and actually work towards completing the missions, but with this new mindset of how my character worked. I just wish the game had been able to tell me that, and I think this is where the game mostly falls over, in that it just doesn't communicate to the player. It has a plot. Oh, it absolutely has a story. And if you can comprehend that fucking curly-whirly of circular logic, congratulations, you've put more effort into it than the person who fucking wrote it, I'm assuming. Because the whole idea, as far as I'm aware, was there's two timelines. You have the... Oh, by the way, this is somewhat spoiler territory now, but if you care, congratulations. You have the Soldier's timeline, which I believe happens in advance, and then you have the Super Mutant timeline, Super Soldier timeline, not Super Mutant. Fucking Fallout 4, always in my mind. Happening after that. So effectively you're playing half the game going into the inciting incident, and then half the game going back out of the inciting incident. The issue is the game doesn't necessarily know whether it's supposed to be doing that as a reveal or if it's supposed to be doing that as a explanation of what's going on. Because from much of the game I was running around going, am I supposed to be working something out here? Because you're acting like you're dropping clues, but I don't know what these clues pertain to. It's like someone going, yes, but my third eye is in the 3 of a 2, and I'm like, what the fuck are you on about, mate? And then he just puts up one leg, activates a propeller, and fucking flies off into the distance. If you don't give me context to the cryptic bullshit you're firing at me, I just don't understand it, and it's frustrating in that regard. The most I got out of it was the military are douchebags and want to kill you. There's a scientist out there who made a virus that is both like the 28 days later rage virus, but is also genetically inherited. So if you have sex with someone when you're a 28 days later rage virus monster, your kids will get that as well. Although it does raise the question of precisely how you successfully procreate in a way that is not, crossed levels of sexual harassment. And I don't want to go into that, to be perfectly honest. That's a bit too dark for my comedically shitty game. So thanks for bringing that up. And then right at the end, it drops the fucking bomb that, oh, by the way, this virus that can be controlled by fucking radio waves can also affect the passage of linear time. So you can loop back around to do it all over again. You're not Stalker. You are not Stalker. You have not earned the right to pull that kind of bizarre backwards bullshit. You have put together a relatively entertaining first-person shooter with some relatively neat ideas and some cool monsters to fight. You have not earned the ability to pull a, whoa, look at this twist ending we pulled. No, fuck you. That made absolutely no sense. You committed one of the cardinal sins of storytelling, which is dumping all your plot near the end. If you want someone to be entertained and interested in the plot and actually follow the progress of the character, you need to keep them consistently not only interested in the character's progression, but up to speed in what they're doing. If you just have one plot line as a chase sequence and one plot line as a roaring rage of revenge, but not give either of those two any kind of real context or weight, you end up getting a very muddled story with no actual payoff, because one plotline, effectively, the payoff is the beginning of the other timeline. But that isn't a payoff necessarily. It's oh, and then suddenly he got shot off screen and then had his brain scooped out and whacked into the super soldier body. There's no foreshadowing. There's no way of kind of realising that you're walking into this until the cutscene plays and you go, oh, that's me dead then. Alright, cool. Time to play as the Jolly Green Giant with a fucking minigun for the last half of the game. It annoys me. It annoys me tremendously because so much of this game was, at the very least, okay, if not quite good. It's just there's a few parts where you feel like either they just didn't have the time to properly storyboard the cutscenes, because I swear you could have taken all those cutscenes, chopped them up and dropped them in during the progress of the story, drop them in between missions. Don't even worry about setting them up and dropping them off. Just break up that dialogue, break up that action, and space it out so every level we get a little bit more of the story. That would have helped. That would have helped tremendously. I probably would have got a little bit more of the story that way. And I would have understood that as we're building up to the end of the soldier's mission, I'm going towards my death, and I'm understanding it before the realization hits him. And that's a more dramatic ending to that kind of storyline. This is just me having a go at a game that came out in fucking 2009? But anyway, I'm beating a dead horse here. I'm beating a dead horse after it's already gone out the gate. So fuck it, I don't know. My metaphors are tortured enough. This is a decent game, and I would recommend it to people if they did feel like playing a game that may not necessarily wow them, but is it's put together with some nice ideas. It's entertainingly bad, and I think that's the key thing to go with, is that much of the things that are bad are things that, when I get angry about something, when I get angry about a bad story, I've still got a smile on my face. And this is the thing, I tend not to get really, angry at this kind of bad storytelling. I'm just kind of the fuck, with my arms getting reanimated like I'm Eddie Izzard or some shit. That is a good kind of bad. And I think that's Eurojunk in a nutshell, is that you should not go into them expecting genius, or at least not well executed genius. You should go into them expecting something bad, but enjoyably so. You can feel the effort that went into the game. You can just tell that somewhere along the line something went a little bit sideways, or the talent just kind of plateaued rather than going the final little distance. But I've played worse for a lot more money. And holy shit, I'd rather play this again than play some of those. So, yes. Thank you very much for listening to me ramble about this game. And again, if you wanted a final recommendation, for 40p, I have no regrets about getting this game, and no regrets about playing this game. I just really wish that someone had been able to, chuck an extra couple of £1,000 into it, an extra couple of months into the development process, and just gone, you need to do this and this, and it will be that much better. If they'd done that, I really would have enjoyed this game a lot more. But anyway, thank you very much for watching, and, well, yes, that's for done, yeah.